Reaction to this shakeup from a guy who knows a thing or two about White Houses that now and then go through this. Of course, Pate Buchanan was there for George Washington when it happened. No, I'm kidding. A former advisor to President Richard Nixon. And, of course, was there with so many other capacities with other Republican presidents. The author of Nixon's White House Wars joins us now, multiple best-selling author Pate Buchanan. Pat, White Houses that tend to go through this upheaval, ultimately, it settles down, but in some cases it doesn't. Now, in this case, what do you see it happening in the comparisons to the rapid turnover that was going on in the Nixon administration?
I don't see any certitude coming. In the Nixon White House, we have two chiefs of staff, Bob Haldeman, who put together a real machine that eventually won 49 states, and Al Haig came in. He was a general. But the problem
By the way,
Haig
was the last general in that capacity, and now we had John Kelly.
I think you had General Goodpaster back under Ike around the time Sherman Adams went out. But let me say this. I think your problem here is you've got a certain culture in the West Wing which is sort of chaotic. It looks like Hamlet's castle or sort of, northern Italy under the Borgias, all these separate powers. And here comes a general, 45 years in service, Marine. He believes in discipline and order and chain of command. And I tell you, if some aide gets in his face using the kind of language Scaramucci used,
oh, forget it.
And
he's a good Catholic. He's a good Catholic, we hear. So I don't know if that would be tolerated very long. But chiefs of staff in general are only as effective as their boss lets them be.
It's
right?
exactly, and you make a point here, or touch on a point. The chaos in the West Wing is partly a consequence of how Donald Trump runs the presidency, calling in one aide and giving him an assignment, calling in another aide, tweeting himself. He doesn't operate like the head of a corporation who's got a chief of staff or a general officer who's got a staff beneath him. So how this works out is going to be tough to see. But my guess is that the general is going to come in and try to impose order and create a hierarchy at the senior staff meeting, which is traditional. And, each individual reports to him, and they go through him to get to the president, or at least he is told when somebody's in there with the president or someone comes out with instructions from the president. So it's going to be interesting to see how this works, because, again, your point, the president of the United States is the perpetrator of the chaos.
What's interesting about John Kelly is he can be as blunt as the president. And in that capacity, when he was hearing critics of the Department of Homeland Security, he went after them. He said, if lawmakers do not like the laws they pass and we are charged to enforce them, he was talking about the travel ban, they should change the laws. Otherwise, they should shut up and support the men and women on the front lines. So without, expletives and anything else that, let's say, an Anthony Scaramucci might use, he's pretty in your face. Now, would he be able to do that and be allowed to do that with the president?
I think with the president, he's got to have an understanding that the president, while he obviously has total freedom of action, has got to inform his chief of staff what he's doing, what he's about to do, what kind of orders he's given. And you can't have the chief of staff sitting in that corner office and all of a sudden tweets are coming out which contradict something they've been doing. So he's got to have an understanding with the President of the United States. I think the President's probably willing to do that right now. It's difficult to see if he follows through. But then with the staff, I think he's going to create a kind of structure which is going to be, it's not going to mesh, I think, with somebody like Scaramucci who says, I can kill everybody in the West Wing.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
It's interesting. The president has a variety of tweets out. We're going to be flashing some of them today. But they were really on message with his frustration with the makeup of the Senate and how everything should be pushed through with a simple majority. Do you think he ran these by General Kelly?
I doubt that he did. I mean, he said, what did he say? I saw a list of them. He must have 6 or 7 tweets
He did. Yeah, it looks like 6 when I count. But by and large, they were really talking about the Congress
Senate.
and the 60-vote makeup of getting any legislation done. Now, the irony here in the failure of the health care rework, it was doomed even with a simple majority. But these were, I thought, on-message tweets. They were actually very effective tweets. They didn't go off-message.
So I think they are, and it's a great issue. So
that's what I think could be helpful, right, Pat?
Sure. I mean, look, this is an issue, and I agree with the president 100% here. Look, the filibuster's gone. We may not like it. Traditional conservatives may not like it. But if the Democrats get in, They will do away with that in order to block anything that the President of the United States does. And so I think that is coming.
Democrats have done that before already with judicial appointments.
Sure, and I think that's going, quite frankly. And so, I mean, I agree with the president, but he ought to have told, you ought to say, General, I'm going to say a couple of things this morning, X, Y, Z, and let him know what's coming.
Pat, let me ask you about, talking to former chiefs of staff, like Andy Card comes to mind in the Bush administration, everything passes through them. I mean, if you want to visit or see the president, everyone goes to the chief of staff, and that was understood, not in all presidencies, but in many presidencies, and it establishes an order that has been kind of respected through Democratic and Republican administrations alike. But of course, there are some people who can be deemed above that. For example, I can't imagine Ivanka Trump or Jared Kushner asking for permission to see Donald Trump. Now, I guess what I'm asking is, will that work? I mean, because that's when it breaks down, when the chief of staff can't control who's taking up the president's time.
I think that, obviously, the chief of staff cannot control Ivanka and Jared. And I think he's going to have to sit down with them and say, look, we all know we got a problem here. And if the president, tells you, Jared, you got to do X, Y, and Z, you're going to have to clear that with McMaster's or the Secretary of State. You've got to get an orderly process going where everybody is aboard here. Let me say this, and I was in clashing with Bob Haldeman constantly for 4 years. He ran an honest White House. I mean, when I sent a memo over to the president he disagreed with, it went right into the president. And as long as the aides knew that, and some of us communicated by paper, you've got an ideal situation. Your problem comes when there are individuals who communicate best talking right to the president. And again, I would bring up Scaramucci. You want to sit down with the president, talk to him, and then go out and issue some blast at someone. And the fellow in the corner office, General Kelly, doesn't know it. You're going to have problems there. And I think they're coming, and it's inevitable. And my guess would be you haven't seen the last heads to roll up there.
All right, now we've seen a lot of heads roll already. Obviously, it began with General Flynn in the beginning, the FBI Director James Comey, of course, the holdover acting Attorney General from the Obama administration. There were others who resigned in their own right, the Press Secretary, of course, Sean Spicer, the Communications Director, the Deputy Chief of Staff. So there has been a good deal of turnover in this. Is that unusual so early on? Other administrations pile up a great deal of departures, voluntary or not voluntary.
When I went, again, let me talk about the Nixon administration. A number of us in the campaign, when they came in, you had basically the president set it up, gave authority to the Germans, as we called them, Kissinger, Haldeman, and Ehrlichman. And what happened was that many of us, those of us in the campaign, didn't survive. Some of them went out. They were appointed to other things. That's the shakedown cruise in the first 6 to 9 months. I've not seen one where you had so many people go like this, but that sort of shakedown where the campaign is run as a different structure. It's much more like it's much more like a newsroom where people are going in and out. But when you get into the White House, everyone I've been in gets eventually into a structure with a chief of staff, someone like General Kelly.
Yeah, and you talk about the setup with Haldeman and all. Say what you will of what happened afterwards. It did work very effectively in securing the re-election of President Nixon at the time. 49
states with an unpopular, Richard Nixon, a two-time loser, deeply unpopular, put together the greatest landslide in history with the city against him, both houses of Congress against him, the press against him. It was an incredible achievement, all, of course, wiped out in the public mind by what happened in Watergate in '73 with the Saturday Night Massacre, shades of which...
let's not get ahead of ourselves. All right, Pate Buchanan, thank you very much.